I, 45F, thought our 20th anniversary dinner would be special. I had booked the same small Italian restaurant where Mark had proposed 2 decades ago. The lighting was low, the tablecloth was crisp white, and a single red rose sat in a thin vase between us. Our children, Leo, who was 19, and Chloe, who was 17, were there too. I had insisted. I wanted it to be a family celebration, a testament to the life we had built. I should have seen the stiffness in Mark's shoulders. I should have noticed the way Leo and Chloe were avoiding my eyes, texting under the table with a shared conspiratorial smirk. I chose to see what I wanted to see. A family, a milestone, a moment of love. The waiter had just cleared our main course plates. I was smiling, ready to suggest dessert, maybe raise a toast. That was when Mark cleared his throat. He folded his hands on the table, a gesture he always used when he was about to deliver bad news at work. My smile faltered. "Clara," he began, his voice flat and devoid of any warmth. "We need to talk." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "We are talking, Mark. What is it? You look so serious." He took a deep breath, and his eyes, which I once thought held the entire world, were cold and distant. "I want a divorce," he said. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I could not breathe. I could not think. It was as if the sound in the restaurant had been sucked into a vacuum, leaving only the ringing in my ears and the thudding of my own heart. A divorce. On our anniversary. In this place. It was a cruelty so profound I could not immediately process it. But what came next was worse. So much worse. Before I could form a single word, a sound erupted from across the table. It was cheering. Loud, enthusiastic cheering. I looked up, my vision blurry with tears I had not yet shed, and saw my children. Leo had his fist in the air, a triumphant grin on his face. Chloe was clapping, her eyes shining with excitement. "Yes," Leo shouted, high-fiving his sister across the table. "Finally," Chloe giggled. "I am so happy for you, Dad. You deserve to be happy." The sound of their joy was like a physical blow. It knocked the air from my lungs and shattered something deep inside me. My husband was leaving me, and my children, the two souls I had poured my entire existence into, were celebrating. They were happy about it. The scene felt surreal, a nightmare I couldn't wake from. Mark just sat there, watching their reaction with a small, satisfied smile. He had known they would react this way. He had probably coached them. My shock gave way to a wave of cold, sharp clarity. This was not a sudden decision. This was a plan. An ambush. They had brought me to this sacred place to utterly humiliate me, to break me down completely. I looked from Mark's smug face to the gleeful expressions of my children. I saw the three of them as a unit, a team aligned against me. The love I felt for them just moments before curdled into something else, something hard and protective. I would not let them break me. I slowly reached into my purse. My hand was shaking, but my voice, when it came out, was steady, frighteningly steady. "A divorce," I repeated, my tone quiet. "Is that what you want?" Mark nodded, his confidence unwavering. "It is what is best for everyone, Clara. We have grown apart." "Grown apart," I echoed. "I see." I pulled a folded document from my purse and placed it gently on the table next to the rose. "Then I suppose this came at the right time?" Leo scoffed. "What is that, Mom? A list of all the things you did for him? It is too late for that." "No, sweetie," I said, my eyes locked on Mark. "It is a DNA test result. It came in the mail yesterday." The atmosphere at the table shifted instantly. The cheering stopped. Chloe's clapping hands froze midair. Leo's smile vanished. Mark's confident posture stiffened, and a flicker of something I had never seen before, pure, unadulterated panic, crossed his face. They all stared at the paper as if it were a venomous snake. And in that moment of shared, silent fear, I knew. I knew they were hiding something far bigger than a simple desire for a divorce. My anniversary was ruined, my marriage was over, and my children hated me. But I had just found a weapon, and I was going to find out why they were so afraid of it. The silence that followed was heavier than any words could have been. Mark stared at the folded paper, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of the table. He was a man who prided himself on control, on always being 10 steps ahead. I had seen him handle corporate crises with less agitation. This single sheet of paper had undone him completely. "What is this, Clara?" he finally asked, his voice a low growl. "What kind of game are you playing?" "I am not playing any games, Mark," I replied, my voice still unnervingly calm. I felt strangely detached, as if I were watching a movie of someone else's life. "It is exactly what I said it is. A DNA test." Chloe, ever her father's defender, jumped in. "Why would you get a DNA test? That is weird. Are you accusing Dad of something?" I turned my gaze to my daughter. Her face was a mask of teenage indignation, but her eyes darted nervously towards her father. She was looking for a cue, for instructions on how to feel. I had raised her to be independent, to think for herself. Seeing her now, so clearly a pawn in her father's game, was another small, sharp pain in my chest. "It has nothing to do with your father's fidelity, Chloe," I said simply. "It is about me." Leo let out a short, harsh laugh. "About you? What? Did you find out you are secretly a genius or something?" His sarcasm was a familiar weapon, one he had honed over the years with his father's encouragement. It used to wound me. Now, it just fueled the cold resolve hardening in my veins. "Something like that," I said, letting the corner of my mouth twitch into a semblance of a smile. Mark pushed his chair back slightly. "This is ridiculous. You are being hysterical. You bring this up now, on our anniversary, to distract from the real issue. Our marriage is over." "Our marriage has been over for a long time, Mark," I said, my eyes meeting his. "I am just starting to understand why." I slid the paper across the table towards him. "Go on. Open it, since we are all being so honest tonight." He did not move. He just stared at it. It was his move to make, his bluff to call. The confident man who had demanded a divorce just minutes ago was gone. In his place was a cornered animal. My children looked back and forth between us, their earlier excitement replaced with a tense confusion. They had come here for a victory party, not a psychological thriller. The waiter, oblivious to the drama, approached with a dessert menu. "Anything sweet to celebrate the occasion?" he asked cheerfully. The absurdity of the question was almost comical. Mark waved him away with a sharp, dismissive gesture. "We are leaving," he snapped. He stood up abruptly, throwing his napkin onto the table. "Leo, Chloe, let's go." Leo and Chloe scrambled to their feet, eager to escape the suffocating tension. But they hesitated, their eyes still fixed on the document. Their curiosity was warring with their loyalty to their father. "Dad, what is it?" Chloe whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "It is nothing," Mark said, his voice tight. "Your mother is having a breakdown. She is trying to manipulate us." I remained seated, a picture of calm. "I am not having a breakdown, Mark. I have never been more clear-headed in my life." I looked at my children. "Your father does not want to open that paper because he is a coward. He knows what it represents." That struck a nerve. Mark's face flushed with anger. "You have no idea what you are talking about," he seethed. "Do I not?" I asked softly. "Then prove me wrong. Open it. Show us all that it is nothing." He snatched the paper from the table. For a second, I thought he would rip it to shreds, but he did not. He just held it in his hand, his thumb stroking the crease as if trying to divine its contents through touch alone. He looked at me, his eyes searching for a hint. A tell. I gave him nothing. I just sat there, waiting. The power in the room had shifted so completely it was almost a physical force. He had started this, but I was going to finish it. He had wanted a war. He had no idea I had just acquired a nuclear weapon. Finally, with a frustrated sigh, he shoved the unopened paper into his jacket pocket. "I am not doing this here," he declared. "This is a private matter." He grabbed Chloe's arm. "We are going home. Now." He practically dragged them out of the restaurant, leaving me alone at the table with the single red rose and the ghost of a 20-year marriage. I watched them go, a united front of fear and anger. I slowly picked up my wine glass and took a sip. The wine was bitter, but the taste of victory was surprisingly sweet. The first battle was over, and I had won. Now, I just had to figure out what the war was actually about. When I got home, the house was dark and silent. Mark's car was gone. A hastily packed suitcase was missing from our shared closet. On my pillow, a single unsigned note lay waiting for me. "Gone to my mother's. My lawyer will be in touch." So he had run. He had taken the children and run from a single unopened piece of paper. The sheer panic in that act told me more than the test results ever could. I sat on the edge of the bed, the quiet house pressing in on me. For 20 years, this home had been my world. I had painted these walls, chosen this furniture, filled every room with what I thought was love and laughter. Now, it just felt empty, a hollow shell. The pain I had held at bay in the restaurant came crashing down on me. Tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. It was not just the end of a marriage. It was the demolition of my entire identity. I was a wife. I was a mother. Without those titles, who was I? But as I sat there, consumed by grief, a new feeling began to bubble up from beneath the sorrow. It was anger, a deep, burning rage. They had not just left me. They had conspired against me. The cheering of my children echoed in my mind, the smug satisfaction on Mark's face. They had wanted to see me crumble. They had wanted me to be a pathetic, weeping victim. I stood up and walked to the mirror. My face was blotchy, my eyes red and swollen. I looked pathetic. I looked like a victim. "No more," I whispered to my reflection. "No more." The DNA test was still in my purse. I had lied, of course. I had not received it in the mail. I had ordered it weeks ago on a whim, a nagging curiosity I could not explain. I had always known I was adopted. My adoptive parents, who had passed away years ago, were wonderful, loving people who gave me a stable, happy childhood. They had told me my birth mother was a young student who could not care for me, and I had never felt the need to dig deeper. But lately, a strange sense of restlessness had taken hold of me, a feeling that a piece of my story was missing. So I had sent my sample to a popular genealogy website, not expecting much. I took out my laptop and logged into the site. The results had come in that very afternoon, just hours before our anniversary dinner. I had not even had a chance to look at them properly. I clicked the notification, and my family tree began to populate. I saw my own name, and branching off it, a name I had never seen before, Eleanor Vance, my biological mother. And next to her name, a long list of close relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, a whole family I never knew existed. I started clicking on the names, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. They were not just names on a screen. They had profiles, pictures, snippets of their lives. And as I dug deeper, a pattern began to emerge. They were all connected to something called the Vance Foundation. A quick internet search brought up dozens of articles. The Vance Foundation was a massive charitable organization, one of the largest in the country, with an endowment in the billions. My family. My biological family was incredibly, staggeringly wealthy. I leaned back in my chair, my mind reeling. This was the secret. This was what Mark was so afraid of. But how could he have known? I had not told a soul about the DNA test. It was a private quest, a journey just for me. Unless he had found out somehow. I thought back over the past few months. Mark had been unusually interested in my laptop lately, often asking to borrow it, saying his was running slow. I had thought nothing of it. Our children, too, had been acting strangely. They had become distant, secretive, their conversations stopping abruptly whenever I entered a room. I had chalked it up to typical teenage behavior. Now I saw it for what it was. They knew. All of them. The pieces started clicking into place with horrifying speed. Mark's sudden insistence on updating our wills last month. His questions about my inheritance from my adoptive parents. A modest sum I had already invested. His offhand comments about how inheritances were handled in divorces. He had not been making small talk. He had been doing research. He had been plotting. He must have seen the email from the genealogy company. He must have done the same internet search I just had. And when he saw the name Vance, he saw a winning lottery ticket. My inheritance. He probably thought that by divorcing me now, he would be entitled to half of whatever I received. It was a cold, calculated financial decision. And he had enlisted our children in his scheme, poisoning them against me, promising them a share of the spoils. Their cheering at the restaurant was not just about their father's happiness. It was the cheer of greedy little vultures circling what they thought was a fresh kill. The rage inside me solidified into something cold and hard as steel. This was not just about a broken heart anymore. This was about justice. Mark and my children had underestimated me. They saw me as Clara, the dutiful wife and mother, the homemaker who managed the household budget and organized school fundraisers. They had no idea who I was about to become. I opened a new tab on my browser and started typing. Best divorce lawyers in the state. If Mark wanted a war, he would get one, but I would be the one with the bigger army. The next morning, I called my best friend, Sarah. I had known her since college, and she was the one person in the world I could trust completely. I told her everything, my voice breaking as I recounted the scene at the restaurant, the cheering, the coldness in Mark's eyes. That absolute monster, she breathed into the phone. And the kids? Clara, I am so sorry. I cannot even imagine. It is worse than you think, Sarah, I said, my voice low. I then explained my discovery about the Vance family and my suspicions about Mark's long-planned scheme. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Clara, she finally said, her tone serious. This is not just a divorce. This is a conspiracy. You need to be smart. You need to be careful. I know, I replied. That is why I am calling you. I need help. I need to find out exactly what they know and how they found out. Okay, Sarah said, her voice shifting into the practical, no-nonsense tone I knew so well. First things first. Change all your passwords. Email, bank accounts, everything. Right now. We have to assume they have access to everything. I already did, I said. First thing this morning. Good girl, she said. Now, about the house. Is there any way they could be listening? Any smart devices? Cameras? I looked around the quiet living room. The smart speaker on the kitchen counter, the security camera in the hallway. Mark had installed them all. My blood ran cold. Oh my God, Sarah. The whole house is wired. Unplug everything, she commanded. Right now. Take them out to the garage. We cannot risk it. From now on, you operate as if you are being watched and listened to at all times. I did as she said, my hands trembling as I disconnected the devices that had once felt like modern conveniences and now felt like instruments of betrayal. I felt like a stranger in my own home. A prisoner surrounded by spies. Okay, done, I said, speaking to Sarah from my cell phone in the backyard. Next, you need to find concrete proof of their plan, she continued. Suspicions are not enough in court. You need emails, texts, something that proves they knew about the inheritance before the divorce filing and that it was their motive. How am I supposed to do that? I asked, feeling overwhelmed. They have his laptop. They have their phones. What about the family cloud account? Sarah suggested. The one you use for sharing photos? Is there a chance their phone backups are linked to it? My heart skipped a beat. The family cloud account. Mark had set it up years ago. It automatically backed up all our devices so we would never lose any pictures. I had not logged into it in ages. It is possible, I said, a glimmer of hope cutting through the despair. Check it, Clara, Sarah urged. But be careful. Do it from a public computer, like at the library. Do not use your home network. We do not know what kind of tracking software he might have installed. That afternoon, I drove to the public library, a hoodie pulled over my head, feeling like a character in a spy novel. I sat down at a dusty computer terminal in a quiet corner and took a deep breath. My hands shook as I typed in the web address for our family cloud service. I entered the username and password, praying Mark had not thought to change it. Access granted. My breath hitched. I was in. I navigated to the backup folder. There they were. Mark's iPhone, Leo's iPhone, Chloe's iPad. A complete recent backup of all their devices. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I started searching. I looked for keywords. Vance, inheritance, money, divorce, lawyer. The results began to flood the screen, and with each new message, my heart broke a little more. It was all there, in black and white, a sprawling digital trail of their deceit. There were emails between Mark and his sister, Brenda, dating back 6 months. The subject line of the first one was, "You are not going to believe this." In it, Mark described how he had seen an email on my laptop from the genealogy company confirming a DNA match with the Vance family. He wrote about his subsequent research, the discovery of their immense wealth, and the dawning realization of what it could mean for him. "This is our chance, Bren," he had written. "Half of that fortune would be mine. We would be set for life. I just have to play my cards right." Brenda's replies were encouraging and greedy. "You have to be smart about the timing, Mark. You need to file for divorce after she officially receives the inheritance, but before she has time to protect it. Get the kids on your side. They can be very persuasive." Then I found the text messages. A group chat between Mark, Leo, and Chloe. The name of the chat was Operation Upgrade. It was filled with months of conversations, plotting my downfall. Mark: "Remember, guys, we have to be a team on this. Your mother is going to play the victim. You cannot fall for it." Leo: "Don't worry, Dad. I know the drill. She is so manipulative. All she cares about is her feelings." Chloe: "When we get the money, can I get a new car for my graduation?" "A BMW?" Mark: "You can have whatever you want, sweetheart. Just stick to the plan. We are so close." There were messages mocking me, calling me clueless and pathetic. They discussed what they would do with their money, planning lavish vacations, new houses, designer clothes. They talked about the anniversary dinner as the big finale, the day they would finally be free of me and get their payout. I sat there in the silent library, tears streaming down my face as I read through the evidence of my family's betrayal. It was more calculated and cruel than I could ever have imagined. They had not just fallen out of love with me. They had been actively working against me, laughing at me behind my back. For months. They were not my family. They were my enemies. I methodically downloaded everything. Every email, every text message, every photo. I saved it all to a new encrypted flash drive that I had bought on the way to the library. This was not just leverage anymore. This was my declaration of war. I walked out of the library, the flash drive clutched in my hand like a weapon. The grieving widow was gone. In her place was a woman with a plan, a mountain of evidence, and a burning desire for retribution. Mark, Leo, and Chloe had no idea what was coming for them. They had wanted to play a game. Now, I was changing the rules. The first lawyer I met was a man named Arthur Vance. It was a coincidence, but one that felt like a sign from the universe. He was a senior partner at a top family law firm, a man with a reputation for being a ruthless shark in the courtroom. Sarah had gotten me the appointment through a friend of a friend. I sat across from him in his large, imposing office, the flash drive on the polished mahogany desk between us. I told him the whole story, from the disastrous anniversary dinner to the damning evidence I had found on the cloud. I spoke calmly and factually, pushing all the emotion down. I needed him to see me as a client, not a victim. When I finished, he leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. He had not said a word the entire time I was talking. "Mr. Vance," I began, my voice a little shaky. "Do I have a case?" He smiled, a thin, predatory smile that did not reach his eyes. "Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice a low, confident rumble. "You do not have a case. You have a public execution. What your husband and children have done is not just grounds for divorce. It is conspiracy to commit fraud. The emotional distress, the calculated deception, this is the kind of case that makes careers." A wave of relief washed over me. "So, what do we do?" I asked. "We do nothing," he said, enjoying the confusion on my face. "Not yet. We let him make the first move. He has told you his lawyer will be in touch. We wait. We let him file. We let him lay out his demands based on his assumption that he is entitled to half of your future inheritance. We let him build his entire case on a foundation of greed and lies. And then?" I prompted. "And then," Arthur said, his eyes gleaming, "we burn it all to the ground." His confidence was infectious. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. I had an ally, a powerful one. "There is another matter," I said, hesitating for a moment. "The inheritance. The Vance family. I have not made contact yet. I do not even know where to begin." Arthur leaned forward, his expression softening slightly. "That is a different kind of battle, and one you should not fight alone. The families of that level of wealth, they have layers of protection. Lawyers, estate managers, trustees. You cannot just knock on the door and announce yourself. You need a formal introduction." He scribbled a name and number on a piece of paper and slid it across the desk. "This is a colleague of mine who specializes in estate and probate law, specifically with high net worth families. Tell him I sent you. He will guide you through that process." I took the paper. "Thank you, Mr. Vance, for everything." "Call me Arthur," he said. "We are going to be working together very closely. Now go home, Mrs. Miller. Try to rest. And whatever you do, do not speak to your husband or your children. Not a word. From now on, I do all the talking." I left his office feeling stronger and more in control than I had in years. The path ahead was terrifying, but at least now I had a map. The next few weeks were a strange sort of limbo. I lived alone in the big, empty house, the silence broken only by calls from Arthur and the estate lawyer he had recommended, a kind, meticulous man named George. George was helping me navigate the complexities of making contact with the Vance estate. He had sent a formal inquiry on my behalf, including a copy of the DNA results, to the law firm that managed the Vance Foundation. We were waiting for a response. In the meantime, Arthur's prediction came true. A thick envelope arrived by courier. It was from Mark's lawyer. Inside was the official divorce filing. I read through the documents, my hands steady. Mark was demanding the house, half of my savings, half of my retirement account, and, as expected, 50% of all future inheritances, windfalls, and gifts received by either party. He had even included a motion for me to pay his legal fees. The arrogance was breathtaking. He had also filed for sole custody of Chloe, citing my erratic and emotionally unstable behavior at the restaurant as evidence that I was an unfit mother. He claimed Leo, being a legal adult, had chosen to live with him. The cruelty of it was designed to crush me, to force me into a quick, desperate settlement. A few weeks ago, it might have worked. Now it was just another piece of evidence for my collection. I scanned the documents and emailed them to Arthur. His reply came within minutes. "Perfect. He has fallen right into our trap. Let him get comfortable. Let him think he is winning." Living in the house became unbearable. Every room held a memory, now tainted by the knowledge of the betrayal that had been festering beneath the surface. I started packing. Not just my clothes, but the small things that defined my life before it had been shattered. The books I loved, the photo albums from my childhood, The paintings I had made in college. I was erasing myself from the life I had shared with Mark, preparing for a new one. One afternoon, while I was clearing out the attic, I found a box of old home videos. Tapes from when the kids were little. Leo's first steps, Chloe's first birthday, family vacations to the beach. My finger hovered over the play button on the old VCR I kept up there. A part of me wanted to watch them, to remember the good times, to try and find the moment it had all gone wrong. But I could not bring myself to do it. The happy, smiling family on those tapes was a lie. It was a fiction I had told myself for 20 years. To watch it now would be a form of self-torture. I closed the box and labeled it the past. I would decide what to do with it later. Maybe I would burn it. Maybe I would just leave it behind for Mark to find, a relic of the family he had so carelessly destroyed for the promise of money. A few days later, I got the call I had been waiting for. It was George, the estate lawyer. "Clara," he said, his voice filled with a quiet excitement. "We have had a response from the Vance estate." My heart leaped into my throat. "And?" "They want to meet you," he said. "Eleanor's sister, your aunt, would like to fly out to meet you in person. Next week." My biological aunt. A real, living connection to the family I had never known. It was happening. The missing piece of my story was about to be put into place. "Okay," I breathed, trying to stay calm. "Okay. What do I do?" "You just be yourself, Clara," George said kindly. "This is not about the money. This is about family. Let them get to know the person you are." His words were a comfort, but my mind was already racing. This meeting was not just about family. It was about everything. It was the key to my future, and the final nail in Mark's coffin. He had bet everything on an inheritance he thought he could steal. He had no idea that I was about to build a real relationship with the people he was trying to rob. The game was escalating, and I was holding all the cards. The week leading up to the meeting was a blur of anxiety and preparation. I met with Arthur and George almost daily. We went over every possible scenario, every legal angle. George coached me on the history of the Vance family, their business dealings, their philanthropic work. He wanted me to be prepared, but not rehearsed. "They want to meet you, Clara, not an actress," he kept saying. Arthur, on the other hand, was focused on the legal battle with Mark. "His lawyer has filed a motion for a preliminary hearing," he told me during one meeting. "They want to freeze your assets, claiming you might try to hide the inheritance. It is a standard bullying tactic." "Can they do that?" I asked, a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. Arthur just laughed. "Let them try. We are going to respond by agreeing to the hearing. In fact, we are going to welcome it." "Why?" I was confused. "Why would we want that?" "Because," Arthur said, leaning forward with that predatory gleam in his eye, "it will give us the perfect stage to present our evidence of his fraud. We are not just going to defend against his motion. We are going to countersue for damages. Emotional distress, legal fees, everything. By the time we are done, he will be the one worried about frozen assets." His plan was bold, and it was terrifying. But it was also brilliant. Mark thought he was the hunter. He had no idea he was walking into a perfectly laid trap. The day of the meeting arrived. My aunt, a woman named Evelyn Vance, had booked a suite at a discreet luxury hotel downtown. George and I went together. I wore a simple black dress, something elegant but understated. I wanted to look like myself, not someone trying to impress a billionaire. We were shown up to the suite. Evelyn Vance was standing by the window, looking out over the city. She was in her late 60s, tall and impeccably dressed, with intelligent, piercing blue eyes. She turned as we entered, and for a moment we just looked at each other. It was like looking at a ghost of my future self. We had the same eyes, the same jawline. It was an undeniable connection, written on our very bones. "Clara," she said, her voice warm but reserved. She stepped forward and took both of my hands in hers. "It is truly you." You look so much like her. Like my mother? I whispered, my throat tight. Evelyn nodded, her eyes misting over. Like Eleanor. I have waited a very long time for this day. We sat and talked for hours. George was there, but he remained mostly silent, a quiet, supportive presence. Evelyn told me about my mother, Eleanor. She had been the youngest of the Vance siblings, a brilliant, rebellious spirit who had fallen in love with a penniless musician her family did not approve of. She had gotten pregnant, and in the face of our grandfather's disapproval, she had run away. She gave you up for adoption because she wanted you to have a stable life, a life she could not provide at the time. Evelyn explained, her voice thick with emotion. She planned to come back for you. She wrote letters, she made plans, but there was an accident, a car crash. She and your father, they both died when you were just a year old. The story was so different from the one I had been told. My mother had not abandoned me. She had loved me. She had wanted me. A wave of grief for the life I never had, for the mother I never knew, washed over me. Our father, your grandfather, was a proud and difficult man, Evelyn continued. He was heartbroken by Eleanor's death, but his pride would not let him search for you. He decreed that the matter was closed. It was only after he passed away a few years ago that I was able to begin looking for you. I hired private investigators, but they found nothing. The adoption records were sealed. I had almost given up hope. The DNA test, I said. It was a fluke. I was just curious. It was a miracle, she corrected me gently. A miracle that has brought you back to us. She then explained the inheritance. My mother, Eleanor, had a trust fund established for her by her grandfather. Upon her death, the trust was to be passed to her children. Since I was her only child, the entire fortune, which had been growing and compounding for over 40 years, was mine. The number she quoted was so large it did not feel real. It was an abstract concept, a string of zeros that had no connection to my life. There are, of course, legal structures and tax implications, George interjected smoothly, stepping back into his role as my lawyer. We will handle all of that. But it is yours, Clara, Evelyn said, her eyes firm. It is your birthright, and with it comes a place in our family, if you want it. Tears welled in my eyes. A family. A real family that wanted me. It was more than I had ever dared to hope for. Yes, I said, my voice choked with emotion. I want that very much. Before we left, I felt I had to tell her about my situation with Mark. I explained the divorce, his greed, and the conspiracy with our children. I did not want any secrets between us. Evelyn listened patiently, her expression hardening with each detail I shared. When I was done, she reached over and placed a hand on my arm. That man, she said, her voice like ice, is a parasite. And we, the Vance family, do not tolerate parasites. You do not need to worry about him, Clara. Our family's legal team will coordinate with your Mr. Vance. We will provide any and all resources you require to ensure this man gets exactly what he deserves, which is nothing. I walked out of that hotel feeling like a different person. I had walked in as Clara Miller, a soon-to-be divorced, betrayed homemaker. I walked out as Clara Vance Miller, a woman with a past, a future, and a powerful protective family standing behind her. Mark thought he was fighting me. He was about to find out he had picked a fight with an entire dynasty. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Mark, Leo, and Chloe arrived at the courthouse together, a united front of smug confidence. Mark was wearing a new, expensive-looking suit. Chloe had a designer handbag I had never seen before. Leo was smirking, whispering to his father as they walked down the hall. They looked like they were on their way to a coronation, not a court hearing. They had already spent the money in their heads. I sat with Arthur at our table, watching them. I felt a strange sense of calm. The anger and hurt were still there, but they were buried deep beneath a layer of cold, focused resolve. This was not a family drama anymore. It was a business transaction. and I was about to close the deal. Mark's lawyer, a slick, overconfident man named Peterson, stood up to address the judge. He painted a picture of Mark as a long-suffering husband, trapped in a loveless marriage with an unstable woman. He claimed Mark had only recently discovered my impending, significant inheritance and was worried I would squander it or hide it out of spite. "Your Honor," Peterson said with dramatic flair, "we are simply asking the court to freeze Mrs. Miller's assets and appoint a financial overseer to ensure a fair and equitable distribution of the marital property, including the forthcoming Vance inheritance, as is my client's right." The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, looked over at us. "Mr. Vance, your response?" Arthur rose slowly, a thick binder in his hands. "Your Honor," he began, his voice calm and measured, "we will not be contesting the motion to freeze my client's assets." A ripple of surprise went through the courtroom. I saw Mark whisper something to his lawyer, a triumphant smile on his face. They thought we were surrendering. "In fact," Arthur continued, "we welcome the court's oversight, because my client, Mrs. Miller, has nothing to hide. My client's husband, on the other hand—" Arthur paused, letting the silence hang in the air. He turned to look directly at Mark. "Has everything to hide." He then turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, we are not here today to discuss the equitable distribution of marital assets. We are here to present evidence of a malicious, premeditated conspiracy to commit fraud, orchestrated by Mr. Miller against his wife of 20 years. Peterson jumped to his feet. "Objection. This is baseless slander." "Is it?" Arthur asked, his voice booming through the courtroom. He opened the binder. "Then perhaps you can explain these emails between your client and his sister, dated 6 months ago, in which they conspire to time this divorce specifically to seize what they call the jackpot of my client's inheritance." He placed a printed copy of the emails on the judge's bench. The judge began to read, her expression growing darker with every line. Mark's face had gone pale. The smug smile was gone, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated horror. "Or perhaps," Arthur continued, his voice relentless, "you can explain this group chat, entitled Operation Upgrade, between Mr. Miller and his 2 children, in which they mock my client and discuss how they plan to spend her money after the divorce is finalized." He placed a thick stack of printed text messages next to the emails. I chanced to look at my children. Chloe was staring at the floor, her face beet red. Leo looked like he was going to be sick. They were not smirking anymore. "And finally, Your Honor," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a dramatic whisper, "we have a sworn affidavit from the executor of the Vance estate." He placed a final document on the bench. "It confirms 2 things. First, the size of the inheritance is indeed substantial. And second, the inheritance is structured within an irrevocable generational trust, established in 1978. Under the terms of this trust, the funds are legally considered the sole and separate property of the beneficiary. It is not, and never will be, marital property." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Peterson stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape. Mark looked like he had been punched in the gut. He stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief and dawning comprehension. He had built his entire scheme on a faulty legal premise. He had blown up his life, turned his children against their mother, for money he could never, ever touch. Arthur was not finished. "Given this evidence of bad faith, malicious intent, and conspiracy to defraud, we are officially filing a countersuit against Mr. Miller. We are seeking full legal fees, punitive damages for emotional distress, and we will be filing a motion to have him declared a vexatious litigant. Furthermore, we will be petitioning for him to be held solely responsible for all marital debt, given that his actions have necessitated this entire legal proceeding." He turned to Mark's lawyer. "Mr. Peterson, your client wanted a war. Congratulations, you have one." The judge looked up from the documents, her eyes blazing with fury. She looked directly at Mark. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "is this true? Did you do this?" Mark just sat there, speechless. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was broken, utterly and completely broken. The judge slammed her gavel down. "This hearing is adjourned," she announced. "I will be reviewing these documents. And I suggest, Mr. Peterson, that you have a very, very serious conversation with your client about settling this matter. Quickly." As we walked out of the courtroom, Mark was surrounded by his lawyer and his stunned-looking sister, Brenda, who had been sitting in the back. He did not look at me. He could not. But my children did. Leo and Chloe were standing by the door, their faces pale and streaked with tears. As I walked past, Chloe reached out and grabbed my arm. "Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Mom, I am so sorry. I did not understand." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then up into her tear-filled eyes. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of the old maternal instinct, the urge to pull her into a hug and tell her everything would be okay. But it would not be okay. The damage was too deep. The betrayal too absolute. I gently removed her hand from my arm. "Yes, you did," I said, my voice cold and steady. "You understood perfectly. You were promised a new car." I walked away without looking back, leaving them standing there in the wreckage of the life they had so eagerly helped their father destroy. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel joy. I just felt empty. The battle was won. But the cost had been my entire family. The fallout was swift and brutal. Mark's lawyer, realizing the catastrophic position his client was in, called Arthur that very afternoon. The word settlement was used repeatedly. Mark's initial demands for half of everything evaporated. Now, he was just trying to avoid financial ruin. Arthur was merciless. He drafted a settlement agreement that was nothing short of a complete and total surrender on Mark's part. I would get the house, free and clear. I would keep all of my savings and retirement funds. Mark would assume all marital debts, including the mortgage he would now have to pay on a house he no longer owned. He waived any and all claim to any inheritance, past, present, or future. In exchange for him signing this, I would agree to drop the countersuit for fraud and damages. "It is more than he deserves," Arthur told me over the phone. "But it gets him out of your life quickly and cleanly. No more court dates, no more drama. You can just move on." "What about alimony? Child support for Chloe?" I asked. He waived his right to alimony. "And since you will have sole custody of Chloe, he will be paying you child support, a significant amount, based on his income. The judge will not be lenient with him after what he pulled." Sole custody. The words hit me harder than I expected. Chloe was still my daughter. Despite everything, the thought of her living with Mark and his toxic influence was unbearable. Mark signed the papers without a fight. He was a defeated man. I saw him one last time when he came to the house to pick up the last of his things. He looked older, smaller. The confidence and arrogance were gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed weariness. He tried to speak to me. "Clara, He started, but he could not finish. What was there to say? "I'm sorry," was a phrase too small for the chasm of his betrayal. I just shook my head. "Just get your things and go, Mark," I said, my voice flat. I did not have any more words for him. I did not have any more feelings for him. He was just a stranger who had lived in my house for 20 years. The more difficult part was the children. They started calling, and texting, and emailing, dozens of messages a day, a desperate flood of apologies and excuses. Leo's texts were pragmatic. "Mom, I messed up. I was an idiot. Dad lied to us. He twisted everything. I want to come home. I need to talk to you." Chloe's were more emotional. "Mommy, I am so sorry. I miss you so much. I hate it at Grandma Brenda's house. Please let me come back. I will do anything. I love you." I read the messages, and I felt nothing. It was as if the part of my heart that had loved them had been cauterized, burned shut by their betrayal. Their apologies felt hollow. born not of genuine remorse, but of the dawning realization that they had sided with the losing team. The money was gone. The lavish lifestyle they had been promised was a fantasy. Now they wanted to come back to the mother they had so gleefully discarded. I talked to Sarah about it for hours. "What do I do?" I asked her, pacing my now empty living room. "They are my children. Am I supposed to just cut them out of my life forever?" "I do not know, Clara," she said honestly. "There is no rule book for this, but you do not owe them forgiveness. Not yet. They broke your trust in the most profound way possible. They need to understand the consequences of their actions. Forgiveness is a gift, not an obligation." Her words resonated with me. Consequences? They had never really faced any consequences before. Mark and I had always cushioned their falls, solved their problems. This time I could not. This time the problem was me. I decided to meet with them. Not at home, but on neutral ground. A small, quiet coffee shop. They arrived together, looking nervous and contrite. They looked like children again, stripped of the adult arrogance they had worn so confidently in the courtroom. They both started talking at once, a jumble of apologies and blame directed at their father. "He told us you were trying to leave him and take all the money," Leo said. "He said you had been planning it for years." "He promised he would take care of us," Chloe added, her eyes welling with tears. "He said we would be a happy family, just the three of us. He made it sound like an adventure." I let them talk until they ran out of words. I listened, my expression unreadable. When they were finished, I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Do you know what the worst part was?" I asked, my voice quiet. They both shook their heads. It was not the divorce. It was not even the plan to take my money. It was the cheering, in the restaurant. The look of pure joy on your faces when you thought my world was ending. They both flinched, shamefaced. "That is something I will never forget," I continued. "You celebrated my pain. You danced on the grave of our family. And you did it for a new car and the promise of an easy life. You made a choice. You chose him, and you chose his greed over me." "We are sorry, Mom," Leo mumbled, staring at the table. "We were wrong." "Sorry is not enough," I said, my voice hardening. "Not this time. You are both nearly adults. You know the difference between right and wrong. You knew what you were doing was cruel. And you did it anyway." I stood up. "I am not going to abandon you. I will continue to pay for Chloe's school. I will help Leo with his college tuition, as we always planned. I will fulfill my responsibilities as your mother. But my role as your friend, your confidant, the person you come to for comfort, that person is gone. You killed her at that restaurant." I looked at them one last time, my two beautiful children, now strangers to me. "You need to build your own lives now, and you need to do it without me. Maybe one day you will become people I can be proud of again. But today is not that day." I walked out of the coffee shop and did not look back. The tears I had been holding back finally came, hot and bitter. It was the hardest thing I had ever had to do, but it was also the most necessary. I had to save myself. And I could not do that if I was still trying to fix the people who had tried to break me. In the months that followed, I began to build my new life. I sold the house, the one filled with so many ghosts, and bought a beautiful apartment in the city, closer to my newfound family. Evelyn and I spoke almost every day. I met my cousins, my other aunts and uncles. They were warm, welcoming people who were eager to know me, to share stories of my mother, to make up for lost time. For the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged somewhere. The Vance family lawyers, along with Arthur, handled everything. The divorce was finalized. The trust was officially transferred to my name. The sheer scale of it was still hard to comprehend, but I was determined to use it for good. I started working with the Vance Foundation, learning about their projects, finding a new purpose for myself. I was no longer just a wife or a mother. I was a Vance. I had a legacy to honor. I heard snippets about Mark's new life. He had moved in with his sister Brenda. He had to sell his expensive car and downgrade his lifestyle significantly. The legal fees and the marital debt had wiped him out. People who had once admired him now looked at him with pity and contempt. The story of his spectacular greed had spread through our old social circles. He had gotten his comeuppance, not through a dramatic courtroom showdown, but through the slow, quiet erosion of his own life. He had traded his family for a fantasy and was left with nothing. My children struggled. Leo had to get a part-time job to supplement the tuition money I sent him. Chloe was in therapy. They still sent me messages, but they were different now. Less desperate, more reflective. They were starting to understand the magnitude of what they had done. I did not know if our relationship would ever be repaired. The wound was too deep. But I had left the door open, just a crack. The rest was up to them. One evening, I was having dinner with Evelyn at her beautiful country estate. We were sitting on the veranda, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Are you happy, Clara?" she asked me, her voice gentle. I thought about it for a moment. Happy is a complicated word, I replied. I am at peace. I have lost a great deal, but I have gained so much more. I have found my family. I have found myself. She smiled and raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she said. I raised my glass to meet hers. "To new beginnings," I echoed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I thought about that anniversary dinner. I thought about the cheering. It was the ugliest sound I had ever heard, but it was also the sound that had set me free. They had meant to destroy me, but instead, they had given me a gift. They had shown me the truth. And the truth, while painful, had cleared a path for a future I never could have imagined. They had wanted half of my fortune. In the end, they were not even a footnote in my real story.